Please listen carefully.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 8th episode of the Study Space podcast, created by the UniPlan team. My name is David.
And my name is Julian.
And we'll be your host for today. Today, we'll be discussing how to get into the proper mindset to seek internships. But before we start, I have to ask, Julian, what's inspiring you today?
What is inspiring me today is a very, very special Christmas gift that I got from my fiance. He gave me an espresso machine for Christmas, and I love it because it has given me the opportunity to make a bunch of really fancy coffee drinks that I wouldn't otherwise be able to make on my own. I've purchased gadgets that sort of simulate espresso-like drinks. I've never been able to achieve like a nice crema or like latte art or anything of the sort, but this espresso machine comes equipped with basically everything I need to make any kind of cafe latte or mocha or macchiato. So I've just been making a bunch of coffee drinks, and that's what's been giving me fuel, and fuel is inspiration.
Awesome. I guess what's inspiring me today is I got an email today, and the email was from the dean of the engineering school, and he said, "Congratulations on making the dean's list." So
nice.
I finally got my grades, my entire grades back. So the last podcast I talked about how I had everything except for electrical engineering.
Yeah.
Turns out I got an A in that class, so my final GPA is a 3.87, which is well above 3.5. Yeah, which is the requirement. And also, I think what excites me even more than the fact that I'm on Dean's List is the fact that I actually have my full transcript. So over the last few days, I've just been applying nonstop for internships, anything that I feel qualified for, or anything that really interests me. But I'll get into that later on in the podcast, since we're talking about seeking internships. So I guess the first point to start off here is with job fairs. Because I think when people think of college and using college as a resource in order to get internships, the first thought that comes to mind is really job fairs. I mean, it's in the word, it's in the name, job. So but if you guys read my blog, I think it's the 4 for Third blog from the UniPlan team. I believe I talked on there about how I felt like the job fair actually wasn't that great. And I'm sure, Julian, you've had a similar experience. So if you could talk about that.
Yeah. I have read a bunch of blog posts and listened to a bunch of podcasts that encourage students of all levels, regardless of whether you're a freshman, so your first year, or second, third, or fourth. You should always go to a career fair. And I agree with that mostly, because I think it's a great exercise to sort of get out of your comfort zone, get in front of employers to talk to them, get some face time, and getting used to talking to other people, especially when you're like me, who is just an introvert at heart and find talking to new people really, really difficult and really, really scary. That's me. So going to career fairs and just getting more face time with talking with random people you don't know, and especially people who are basically judging you for your abilities and your fitness for jobs and internships, is a great way to get out of your anxiety shell that, I get myself into all the time. However, that being said, job fairs for me during my freshman, sophomore, and junior years of university, or I should say my first, second, and third years of university, they proved to not be as effective in my getting internships, my internships at NASA, and ultimately my job at Oracle now. And And yeah, that's really disappointing. You go and you prepare, you do all the steps, right? You create a resume, you dress up nicely, you make sure that you wash up and you practice that firm handshake, you practice your pitch and everything. And ultimately, for me at least, it didn't go anywhere. It didn't lead to anything in terms of professional development. So that's the gist of my experience. I don't know if you had a similar experience, or I know that as a freshman, going to a job fair is a little bit different because I think in general, most employers at job fairs are looking for somebody in the upper division. So what do you think?
Right. No, it was totally useless for me. And I don't think it was just for me. I think it was for the other people too. I mean, as I talked about in my blog, when I was there, I just saw these giant piles of resumes like stacked up on each employer's desk. And I was even talking to some of the sophomores, juniors, even a master's student there. And they were just talking about how, like, when you go there, you shouldn't really expect a job or anything because these employers, like, they go to hundreds and hundreds of schools, and I don't think they're going to sort through thousands of resumes in order to find, jobs for maybe like a few dozen interns, or maybe a little more than that if it's a bigger company. But I don't think it's worth it for them. And so I think the right mindset to have when you go to a job fair is, rather than trying to get a job, it's more about learning about the companies that are there. Because when I was there, I managed to learn a lot about certain companies, and even though I wasn't really qualified for the positions that they were offering, I knew that just finding out more and preparing myself to maybe work for them in the future would be a good idea. Almost all of them gave me little pamphlets or little business cards, so that I could go apply online. And so I think it's a good way to introduce yourself to companies in industries that you're interested in, especially if you're really not familiar with what you want to do. If you're not really sure, you can go ask them some more questions about what they do. But I think it's a really, really bad choice to go there and seeking to get internships, because I think it's a much better idea to employ some of the other methods that we'll be talking about shortly.
Yeah, in my experience, I mean, at my career fairs at San Jose State, there were many employers who would. So I think let's take a step back here. So students, when they go to a job fair, primarily
Right.
you're expecting to get like a one-on-one discussion with like a recruiter or somebody who already works there, right? Like a manager or an employee in general. And you want to get some face time. You want to talk to them about any possible opportunities that they might have, either like an internship, or if you're closer to graduation, a full-time job, right? At my university, that was not the case for many of the employers that went to my job fair. So while that was the case for some of the employers, I think many of the employers that had booths at my job fair, what they did was, instead of going one by one, they just grabbed like a little group of maybe like 5 to 10 people and got them around into a circle, and then just passed out the pamphlets that you got, just basically detailing like the company mission, or like how to apply online. And then the person at the booth would really just be talking about life at the company, or like how to apply online, or like what they're looking for and such. And that ultimately you hope to sort of get ahead of people applying online, but in reality, that's all they tell you to do is go online and apply at the link. So you're not really ahead of anybody, or you're not really getting your resume, on the top of the stack, for lack of a better term. So that's the impression that I got, and I was really, really disappointed when I went to my job fairs and I saw that, expecting to get one-on-one interaction with some recruiters, but instead I got pulled into like a group of 5, and they just passed out pamphlets talking about a bunch of stuff that I could have easily searched up on like Glassdoor or something. So, what
Yeah,
about
no,
you? Like,
definitely.
is that something that you saw at your job fairs?
Well, actually, yeah, I had a similar experience at my job fair. A lot of the booths, like I'd say, like at least half of them, literally just had those pamphlets, and the people that were there weren't even engineers. I mean, this was, for context, this was a STEM specific career fair. I didn't go to the general career fair because I heard it was almost the same thing. It was just with a lot of non-STEM employers too, which doesn't really make a difference because I do want to work like specifically in engineering.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't have mattered for me if I went to that one. But
Yeah.
for the one that I did go to, um, yeah, there was this one booth. I'm not gonna say the company, but let's just say that they're like a big defense company. So they were, they had some people there, and I was asking this lady like, oh, like, can you tell me more information about the company, and at least I could get some information about what their engineering is. And she said, oh, actually, I'm from human resources. They just sent me here because they didn't have anyone else to send, so I can't really
Yikes.
give you any information. So I was like, oh, so they did have people at certain booths, but a lot of them were human resources reps. The ones that did have engineers, a lot of the engineers did say some really cool stuff. Like they were talking about how they're using RF for certain applications, or FPGAs. If that stands for Field Programmable Gate Array. I don't know if you know what that is, Julian. But
Nope, no idea.
it's an electrical engineering like device, and so it was really cool to find out some stuff from them. But it wasn't like an interview, or it wasn't like they were judging you or anything. They literally were just there to inform you. So I mean, there was some valuable stuff to get from it, but like you said, you can get all the stuff online. If you really don't want to go like online and search for this stuff, I guess it's a nice introduction. But that's it. That's all it is. It's an introduction. It's not like you're gonna get a job from this or anything like that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's unfortunate.
Which is why you really have to take a second step, and this is what we're gonna talk about in this podcast. So, one of my friends said he had some advice, and he said, when you're looking for internships or perhaps a job, you have to treat it as a 4-credit class. And a 4-credit class obviously is like, really demanding, and you have to be expected to do work like consistently when you're in it. And during that time when you're off from school, which is usually hiring season, at least I know for the companies that I'm applying to, a lot of them are hiring around this time, like early January, late December, pretty much, because that's usually when students are out of school. And you have to treat this time as if you're taking a 4-credit class during it, because you can't just casually go and apply for companies, like a few of them, and expect to get even one offer back, because some people apply for hundreds and they might get none. So Julian, I want to hear your thoughts on that piece of advice, treating internships as a 4-credit class.
If I heard that advice like when I was a freshman, that would have been insanely useful, because I definitely did not treat it like another class. I did search for things, but as a freshman, it's not that I didn't want an internship or I didn't want a job, but I think it was more of like a lack of understanding of the nuances with job seeking and the schedule behind it and such. So I was really just like shooting out applications that seemed most convenient for me. Like I was a freshman, I was going to school, and so the only times that I would be available would be obviously the summer, which is the case for a lot of internships. Students usually go for their internships during the summer between academic years. That's normal. But I would be looking for that stuff, and I would look for specific programs. I guess this is one like tip that I did as a first year student, was I was looking for specific internship programs tailored towards freshmen and sometimes even sophomore students, because in general, internships really only apply, I guess employers only want juniors and seniors in their internships, because at that point you have gained enough foundational knowledge to sort of be at least somewhat contributional towards the work of the company and the team. Whereas as a freshman and a sophomore, you haven't really done much yet, so you don't really have that much technical knowledge to be able to contribute as much. So that being said, there are large companies like Google who with their engineering practicum that offer programs specifically for freshman and sophomore students. So that was cool. And I never got into those because even though it's like an internship tailored towards freshman and sophomore students, their interview process was still really, really selective. So I never got into those, unfortunately. And the reason why David and I say that right now is around the time of hiring season, that's because a lot of companies hire student interns or even like new graduate jobs like 6 months in advance, very, very far in advance. I got hired a little late, actually. I mean, I interviewed for Oracle. I want to say like around March, and I got my offer around April. So, and then I was due to start at Oracle in June. So that was a pretty late like interview to offer timeline in comparison to like the average. And for my NASA internships, it's actually even later, which is really, really odd. So what I was trying to do was I was trying to do a spring internship, or really, I was really trying to get any internship, period. So I didn't really mind that this internship was going to be a spring internship, which is during January to, let's say, May. So January to May is a spring internship because it's during the spring semester. And NASA, what the applications were due, let's say November. Let me see. I want to say November. So here's the odd thing. I got my internship offer also in November. So like around the same month that I applied to my NASA internship during university, I got an offer back like within the month, which is very, 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 very late considering I was starting my internship like the first week of January. So that's like a month before, like a month and a half before the actual start date, which is really, really late. So obviously the timeline varies between companies. But I'm going to say that the average for tech companies in general, at least for engineering, is 6 months. So you should start applying for summer internships around the winter time, which is really soon.
Right. That sounds about right. Yeah. I started looking for companies when I was even like let's say October. I want to say like I was still in my first semester of college. I was looking for a few. I saved a few, that looked interesting, and the application didn't really have due dates. It was just like whenever the spots fill up, like we'll just stop hiring. And these are for summer positions, by the way. So they were like doing it super early. And I got my transcript back a little bit late. Like I said, I only got it this week. And I was supposed to get it like way, way before. I don't blame my teacher for doing that. I'm sure he just wanted to be careful, but yeah, he did a little late. And by the time he finished grading it, I looked back at my LinkedIn and looked at all my saved jobs, and half of them already like were filled up. They were no longer accepting applications. So I was a little upset at that. But this is just to show you that a lot of companies hire super, super early. So if you want to like really get a head start, you should even start in your first semester, I'd say, at least looking for jobs and saving the ones that look interesting to you. So if like you do see that they're closing applications soon, you can get like on that really quickly. I know for me it was impossible to apply before that because I hadn't had my transcripts yet, and a lot of companies require that. But if you're like say a sophomore or a junior and you already have like a freshman year transcript, you can just put that in and say like, oh, your current transcript is still like not here yet. So that's I guess a little piece of advice.
Yeah.
But
it was hard to apply for stuff when you hadn't done anything yet. Google during their application for their engineering practicum for their freshman and sophomore year internship, they were asking about prior coding experience. And I was like, well, I only just started my intro class, so it's hard for me to write about, like one of the questions was like, what's a programming challenge that you faced, and how did you go around that challenge? And I was like, well, I guess a programming challenge I had was that I couldn't wrap my head around loops the first time I learned them. And what I did was I used the debugger, and that helped me understand what the loop was doing. And I was able to understand how iteration works and such like, which at the time, like at the first half of freshman year, the first half of the first semester in intro computer science, like that is very profound, and it seems like a really complicated problem. But now, as a university graduate, and I'm an engineer now, just listening to myself say that is like child's play, you know, like loops are like just the very basic of basics, really. So I totally get what you're saying. It's like when you don't have much under your belt, especially when you're like early in your educational career, it's hard to apply for these things. So, you know, hopefully we can talk to something about earlier students applying for these sort of things.
Right, and there's a lot of internships, I'd say, that you search for. You search for internships and you find like, oh, these are all like really interesting and I might want to do these. And then you add in the factor of like, oh, like what year do I need to be? And a lot of them already disqualify you just because of the fact that, you know, you're a freshman. And a lot of the times I understand why they do that. I mean, these guys are asking for like really, really, you know, refined like technical skill sets, and it's really hard for freshmen to go and get those. Like no matter how hard you try, I think it's almost impossible if you haven't taken those classes yet, or if you haven't like experienced that through senior level design classes or something like that. So it's really difficult. I mean, I think I applied for a few internships that I don't even think I'm really that qualified for, but I meet like at least most of their criteria. So I'm hoping that they can overlook certain things. I'm just applying to as many as I can, because I think it's good to at least try, and you know, might as well take a shot, right?
Yeah. Now, here's the thing. You talk about criteria on an application, right? So here is what I have to say on that subject. So my NASA internships, okay? When I was first looking at software development internships at NASA, what I saw was a bunch of criteria that included a variety of skills that I was not familiar with, at least at the time. Things like unit testing with C++. And at the time, like I didn't know C++ unit testing. I only knew unit testing in Java. Unit testing is basically just testing a bit of code in isolation, just like by itself, without depending on any outside code. So I didn't know C++, period, actually. I took a course in C++ because it was like an elective course. It wasn't my very first language, and at the time, my primary language that I preferred to use was Java. So I was applying to roles, and I was looking at roles at NASA, and they seem to all prefer C++ because these are like... what they're doing is they're doing software development and software engineering for computing systems that are very resource, let's say resource light. They weren't really the most performant of computing systems, so you needed to use the fastest language possible that didn't take up as many or as much computing resources, right? So you're programming for something like a CubeSat, which you know you said in a previous episode, it's a very small cubic satellite. So there isn't a lot of computational power that you can put in a small cube, right? And even more so on like a rover, let's say. A rover needs to be able to survive a trip many miles into space with all of that turbulence and the launching and the landing and all that. A computing system needs to survive all of that. So it needs to be small and it needs to be robust. And unfortunately, that means having a system that isn't quite as strong as, you know, the crazy personal computers that we have here on Earth. So C++ is the preferred language to use because it's a lower level language and it's very fast, very performant. And I wasn't super familiar with C++. Another thing was source control, GitHub, right, is a big deal in software engineering and software development. I didn't know that because I had never worked on like a large team project that really warranted using a source control system. So I never had any experience with that. You think you know source control when you're working on like a solo project, but you really don't know source control until you've worked on a team project together. That's where source control really, really helps. But computer programming and software development jargon aside, basically the internship had a bunch of requirements that I did not satisfy. 100%, I know for a fact, I did not satisfy these requirements. However, luckily, the NASA internship applications had a box where I could write about my skills. The question was, how do your skills and experience apply to the skills that are required as part of this role? And instead of lying, which is the worst thing you can do on any sort of job-seeking application, I admitted that I wasn't 100% familiar with these skills. However, I believe that it is a strength of mine to learn very quickly. And I gave examples of how I learned quickly. Like, for example, I took a summer course in C and C++, which are very similar languages, but I was learning it in a very condensed amount of time. I also learned how to read and navigate the university library system, which is very complex. And it's actually, at my university at least, it's different from traditional libraries where they use the Dewey Decimal System. We use the Library of Congress organization system or sorting system. So it's a tad different. It's still sorted alphabetically and numerically, but it's a little different, and the sections are really confusing sometimes. So I used a bunch of examples, as many examples as I could, to demonstrate my ability to learn quickly. And what that did was, or at least my intention was, stating these examples would show the person looking at my application that while I might not know these things, I am able to learn them very quickly. And I think that is what ultimately landed my NASA internships. And I definitely started the job at NASA knowing next to nothing about what I was actually doing. And my mentor was totally okay with that because he fully trusted my ability to, head down in the books and learn about the things that I needed to learn to do my job. So the lesson here, I guess, long story short, is while some opportunities have some requirements, you don't have to fulfill every single one of them, even though it might say like a required skill or like a required, part of the application. Sometimes that's just a very strong preference. And if it's all about attitude, right? If you can demonstrate that you're a good fit for the team, or you're able to learn quickly and you can overcome the fact that you don't know something, then I think that puts you in a very, very good position. So just a tidbit, when looking at applications, don't be afraid when you look at an application that has something that you don't have, go for it and just say that you can learn it. You can learn it quickly, right? Because that's what college is all about, is learning a bunch of stuff very, very quickly.
Right, definitely. I think that is good advice, because I don't know if you would agree with me when I say this, but I don't even think that you can be 100% qualified for a job. There's absolutely no way that there's a single person who can fit every single requirement for a job.
I would argue to say if there is somebody who is 100% qualified for a job, they're probably overqualified for the job.
Right, yeah, they shouldn't even be doing that. But I do want to say that there are like hard limits. Like Julian talked about being flexible, of like, oh, even if I don't know this specifically, I've had similar experiences and I'm really quick at learning, so I'd be able to do that. But I feel like there are some requirements that are just like, I guess, non-negotiable. One of them is actually GPA. A lot of the times, a lot of companies have a really strict requirement on GPA. Like if you have a below a 3.0 GPA, or sometimes it's like some companies do really weird things like 3.2 or 3.3, you just cannot apply for that intern. Like you're not going to get it. They're just going to throw it in the trash. You're not even going to look at the rest of the resume or the application. Some companies I notice even have a 3.5 GPA requirement, which I think is a little bit high.
That's a little ridiculous.
Yeah, that is a little ridiculous, but it's a requirement, and if you can meet that 3.5 requirement, I think it is better for you. Although I wouldn't really stress that. There are some other requirements like we talked about with year in school. Some companies do a really soft limit on that. They're like preferred sophomore, juniors, or seniors, but they're like, if you're a freshman with a lot of skills, like we'll take you. Whereas some companies actually have a hard limit. They're like, you must be a sophomore, you must be a junior, applying for this internship. But that can work against certain students as well. Certain companies I've seen, they have it so that you must be a freshman, sophomore, or junior. You can't be a senior or a grad student. And I think that's just because they really do want to like train you and actually they want to get you like used to the company, because I think those positions are more like they're really looking for full-time hires, because a lot of internships end up leading into full-time jobs, and they want to train you right from there and have you learn from scratch so that you're a better fit for them in the future. But like I said, it really depends on the company.
Yeah, on the subject of the GPA requirement, I know it sucks because not everybody is like the best academically, and you might think that like, yeah, academically I might perform not so great, but on the job I know I can do a great job. Like, I know that feeling. You know in your heart that you're a hard worker, that you're very diligent, your work ethic is flawless, and you just might be struggling through some family problems or mentally stressing problems that can affect your academic performance, and so your GPA tanks and you're not quite as qualified on paper, but in your heart that you are qualified for it, and your employer, you've been judged as though you have no ability at all. And I know that sucks, but you have to understand that from the company's perspective, right? When you are hiring somebody who doesn't have any professional experience at all, you have to sort of read the terrain with the information that you have. So, and that information is GPA. That information is the courses that you've taken. That information is your the projects that you've done in and outside of class, because that's really all that they have that speaks to your work ethic. And if you're given the opportunity to sort of write out your reasons or write out anything really, like on the NASA applications, they have, I think, I don't want to call them essays. They have 2 boxes for 2 paragraphs that you can write about your skills or about yourself, why you're a good fit for the job. And I know that that's not a common thing. There are actually a lot of job applications that you just apply with your resume. So you don't have the opportunity to sort of speak about yourself yet in a way that explains on paper the reasons for a lower GPA than average, let's say. So and that's unfortunate. That sucks. But let that be sort of a motivation for you to attempt to perform better in university, or sort of at least take that into consideration, because from the employer's perspective, that's the only information they have on you and your prospective performance as an employee at their company. Ultimately, the company is investing their time and their energy and their money into allowing you into the company to basically be paid to learn things, right? I think seldom interns are ever expected to really contribute in a very important and vital way, at least at the start. Like maybe when you come back for a second internship, or when you get hired full time, then perhaps at that point you're able to contribute. But when you're just beginning, nobody really expects you to do anything profound. So at that point, the company is actually seriously investing time, money, resources into helping you learn and develop your skills. So to have that opportunity be given to you a GPA, while it's a very shallow sort of metric for your abilities, it really is the only thing that companies have to glean whatever, whatever performance that you might have at the job,
Right. I definitely agree with that. I mean, it's really difficult to, especially when you're doing an online application, for companies to see that. That's why my friend, actually, the one who talked about treating it as a 4 credit class, talked about creating a portfolio, perhaps. So he has he has a website that he created online, and a lot of companies allow you to link your LinkedIn or an external website that lets you showcase your accomplishments. And this is really, really good, especially for engineers, because you can show off all the projects that you might not have room to put in your resume. Yeah, because your resume is a very short, brief overview.
Yep.
People can literally view that in minutes.
Yep.
So it's super useful to have a website, because people can see, like, wow, like, this kid really put in a lot of effort into this one project. You might have 3 lines to describe that in a resume, but on a website you can take as much space as you need. And a few companies that I applied to, I even linked like certain videos or other like external links that really like talked about some of the projects and accomplishments that I had. And so I think that's really useful. That's a way to kind of compensate for the fact that companies are not going to spend a lot of time looking over your application, just because they have so many to go through. Like a lot of the internships that I applied to have dozens, hundreds of applicants, and they might have like 5 positions. So that's really difficult for them to go through and eliminate like so many people. And so it's really important to meet certain hard requirements, and GPA is one of them. I think that skills are another one. If certain internships don't see that you've mastered, let's say, a programming language, then they just might automatically disqualify you, because certain internships are very, very specific on that. Like, I know an internship that I applied to said must be proficient like in C++, and that wasn't one of the preferred qualifications. That was one of the like basic qualifications. So if you don't even have that on your resume, they're just going to throw it away. And I think that's really important to note.
You know what's really funny is that when I was applying for like full-time jobs, at the time I was learning or building I was building our mobile application Uniplan in this framework. It's a really, really relatively new framework called Flutter. It's a mobile application SDK for cross-platform mobile development.
Right.
And Flutter literally had only just been released for like half a year, like 6 months. Okay. And it's been in beta for like some time before that. So I was developing Uniplan while the framework was still in beta. It was still in development, and they only released it in December of, I think, 2018. So at this point it was like, let's say spring 2019. And I was applying for full-time jobs, and it was really funny. I saw this job post that advertised that they were looking for a Flutter developer, and I was like, hey, perfect. I literally just learned the Flutter framework. I am probably more familiar with it than pretty much any other college graduate, because this was like a really new thing. So I had the golden opportunity to hop in on a job that required a skill that was new enough that the pool of possible applicants was small. So I was really excited. I looked at the requirement, and what made me shy away from applying was the fact that they required, here's the funny part, 3 years of Flutter experience, when Flutter itself had not been officially released for even a year at that point. And I don't think Flutter was in beta for like 3 years. It was in beta for like, let's say, half a year tops. I don't even think crazy. Flutter existed 3 years ago.
But it's a crazy requirement.
Yeah, it's dumb, right? Just reading that tells me enough about the company and the fact that their expectations are sort of ridiculous, because you're asking for a new grad who has 2 or 3 years of experience in a framework that didn't exist 2 or 3 years ago. And the doubly funny thing is that you're asking for a new grad to have 2 or 3 years of experience in something. That just doesn't make any sense, right? Like, because you're a student, you're learning. You don't really have job experience that becomes 2 or 3 years of experience. So that was just a really funny application or a job opportunity that I saw online. And while it looked cool, I ultimately didn't apply because it's like, I'm not going to apply for something that is asking for something so ridiculous.
Yeah, no, that's crazy. That's a crazy requirement. I mean, I see a lot of positions that have really, really crazy requirements, even for students in college. Like I see a lot of the tools and technologies they require are stuff that people don't even learn until they're like outside of college, because it's impossible for like college students to get their hands on that. So no, it's some companies do have ridiculously high standards, and yeah, like you said, you might not want to apply for those certain companies.
Right, because then what does that say about the company you're applying for, right? If their attention to detail is so, I guess they have such a lack of attention to detail that it's like, do I really want to work at a company like that? So you got to ask yourself these questions.
Yeah. So I mean, we talked a lot about applying online, but there are some techniques that I think we should talk about when it comes to like using the internet to find job postings and filtering through everything. So I guess I'll go first. The techniques that I've been using, probably pretty terrible, because obviously I'm a freshman. I have no idea how to do this. I've just been going off advice from certain people, and
let's see.
My first time doing it.
What did you do? Yeah.
So no, my first approach was to first go on my school's like I don't know what you would call it. It's not really like a recruiting website. It's just kind of like
job board, I guess.
Yeah, it's like a job board. Yeah, right. And the way they do it is really, really good, I found, compared to the other methods I've used. And the reason why is they filter it out. They filter almost everything out. So you can specifically search for summer, then you can search for internship. You can search for like, what's it called? Like, you can add like certain skills that you have. So for example, C++, Arduino, like certain hardware development skills, PCB design, stuff like that. And then from there, you can they already have your GPA. They have your what's it called? They have like the school information. Obviously, they have your level, your school year. My bad.
Yeah.
So like if you're a freshman, sophomore, and like because a lot of companies look for that as a hard requirement or a soft requirement, and then it brings it up based on like a location as well, so you can add in certain locations. So I pretty much added only locations in California because that's where I want to work during the summer. I don't want to stay in Baltimore, and so that's just all the filters that I put on there, and that lowered it to, I think it's around like 70 something internships. And here's the thing, only about like 4 of those I was fully qualified for, like based on the parameters that I set. And then and 2 of them I wasn't even completely fully qualified for, because they're actually SpaceX and Tesla, which prefer junior and senior applicants. So that was kind of funny. So I was really only qualified for 2, and I applied for both of those. We'll see how that goes. But I wasn't able to find those 2 jobs anywhere else, and I think those are very, very specific like internships, really, really small companies. And so I think that was a really good resource for me to find those 2. Because even if I don't get them, I still give it a shot, and I think I do meet all of the requirements. So I'll have a better chance of getting those 2 than I will anything else I've applied for, I think. The other way I did it was I used LinkedIn. So LinkedIn, I think, has a lot of information on you too, although not as much as your school does. But it does have some things that you can filter by, and you can search. And it can search based on your profile, your experience, and stuff like that. So I use LinkedIn as well for just recommended jobs, and a lot of the jobs that were recommended for me were okay, I would say. But like I said, hard requirements eliminate a lot of jobs for you. One was location, so I just had to ignore anything that was too far away. Then I had to go through and eliminate anything that had school year in it, which LinkedIn doesn't have a feature for, unfortunately. So that was just like a waste of time going through so many jobs. The good thing about LinkedIn is it has a lot more jobs than a school like job search. So it is a bigger pool, which means you'll get a lot more companies that pop up. The bad thing about it is it's just super hard to filter through. So I did manage to find a few on LinkedIn that I think I was qualified for and met the parameters of like time I was willing to work and the skills that I had. And I applied, I think, around like probably 6 on LinkedIn. And I had a lot more than that. I had like probably over a dozen previously, but a lot of those had expired deadlines, and a lot of them, I looked at it a second time and I realized there was a requirement in there that I saw that I hadn't previously seen, and that disqualified me completely from the internship.
Yikes.
And a lot of them, I realized I saved them, and they were fall internships. They were like during school internships. Because I looked through and I was like, wait, why are they asking for only local universities? And I realized, oh, I see. It's because it's a during school internship. It didn't specify summer internship. Some of them don't specify summer internships, but it will be a summer internship. They'll put in the description like working hours are from May through August, which is obviously during summer, but a lot of them won't, and so you have to actually read the entire thing to find it, and sometimes it's really hard to find too.
Yeah,
because it's just such a long description. They copy and paste a lot of stuff about their company, and then they put in the requirements at the end. So I recommend anybody to just skip to the end and like find all the important stuff. Just look through that and see. And a lot of times there'll just be one thing that'll automatically disqualify you.
Yep.
Another thing I used Glassdoor. Wasn't able to find anything from there actually. Really interesting. And I think it's just because my Glassdoor profile is not really complete, like not fully complete. I have like some stuff on there, but it's not nearly as complete as my LinkedIn profile, which isn't even that complete either, because it's really difficult to put in a lot of stuff that you did for school but isn't necessarily work experience, and I don't want to go in and just say like, oh yeah, I did this for like a school club and count it as work experience, because I know that would kind of be like inaccurate. What else did I use? I did not use Indeed, or I used ZipRecruiter twice. Funny enough, both the companies I looked for on ZipRecruiter, I was unqualified for because they said I needed to be a sophomore standing. They said it in a really weird way though. They said you must have 30 credit hours, and so if you take 15 credit hours a semester, that means you're pretty much like a sophomore.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was that was a weird way of putting that I needed to be a sophomore. But filter through that. Another one I found out was already closed, unfortunately. And then I went through Google. I just started searching up internships on Google. Perhaps I could find a few. And I think if I did find a few, I found NASA. I totally forgot about that. Yeah. One of them I found was actually through NASA. It reminded me because I searched up just like engineering internships, and then I found NASA, and I was like, oh, I should go apply for that because that's like a name I've heard of before. And that's another technique I use. I just remembered some companies that I found at the job fair and some companies that I've heard of before just through word of mouth, and just because like they're more popular, and I just applied to those ones as well.
Is there a NASA center, out of curiosity? Is there a NASA center near your university?
There is. It's about 40 minutes away.
Not too bad.
It's Goddard. Yeah, but I don't want to. I didn't apply for Goddard. My bad. Yeah, I didn't apply for that one because, like I said, I want to be in California.
Yeah.
And even if I were to stay there, I would have to sublet an apartment, and I'd have to move all my stuff there just for the summer, and then move it all back to a dorm. So I was really not looking forward to doing that. So I was like, no, I just won't. I don't think it's worth. Even if it's an awesome internship, like, I don't think it's worth it. So I just applied to JPL, which is actually kind of far.
Yeah, from Orange County, that's like an hour-ish.
Yeah, it's an hour. It's over an hour if you count traffic. But if you go like 6 a.m.
You could do what I did, which was go an intern at NASA at the same time as you're going to school.
Oh, yeah.
Which was very tough. Like
that's not
like
a good
the
idea.
hardest semester of my life, hands down, because I was working full time and I was going to school full time, and I didn't know that was my mistake, because like while I loved my NASA internship so much, like to death, I didn't know when I was applying to the internship that the spring and fall internships were full time. Like I thought,
Right.
I thought that, oh, since it's a fall and spring internship, it's going to be during the semester for everybody who's applying. So therefore,
Right.
surely NASA would understand that it's a part-time thing, right? So I just applied, and it's like, oh, like here's an offer for an internship at NASA. And by the way, it's full time. And like at that point, I wasn't going to say no to NASA. So I took it, and I sort of registered for classes such that so I played my cards smart. I two of the courses I took were fully online. So 2 out of the 4 minimum required for to be a full-time student, because I wanted to maintain my financial aid. So I needed to be a full-time student in order to qualify for financial aid. So I took 2 courses out of my 4 to be fully online, and they were GE, so they were really easy. And then 2 other courses were computer science courses, which were offered only on campus. And luckily, I reached out to my mentor before, or I guess immediately when I got my offer. I reached out to my mentor because my mentor's name was on the offer letter. I reached out to him, and I thanked him for the opportunity, but I told him that I was a student and I wanted to continue going to school while I was working. And, I was wondering if it might be possible for us to work around that. However, like if that's not possible, like I'm fully willing to sort of take an academic, what is it called when you take a leave? From a leave of absence.
Leave of absence, yes.
So it's like a temporary leave of absence from being a student, so that I can intern here at NASA full time and then come back to school. And I'll graduate a semester later than I planned. Whatever. I'm working at NASA. So you can do that.
Thought of that. That's
you can
crazy,
do that.
Yeah.
You don't have to reapply to the university, or it won't look bad on your academic record, because you can sort of write it off as hey, I literally worked full time, building my own skills for half a year. Chill.
Yeah, right. That's interesting. I've never thought of that.
You can do that, and there's nothing wrong with graduating in 4.5 years if it's if it's a semester long internship. Graduating 4.5 years, but you have a NASA internship under your belt, which is strong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So aside from those methods, so those are all online job recruiting websites. I'm pretty sure I use at least 1 or 2 more, like maybe internships.com. I think I found 1 from there. But just go to as many job boards as you can and try to filter out as much as you can. It's best if I think you go on a school job board, because it just filters out so much for you and it's so much more convenient. You just apply to the top ones that you have, whereas LinkedIn's not as efficient. And also just companies that you recognize, you might as well try, because a lot of the bigger companies I think are more willing to accept students who don't have as much experience, because they're not necessarily trying to make giant progress like a lot of small companies are. What else did I do? Oh, I also got an email. I showed this to you, Julian, from not a company. It's a government institution that found me through my school's job postings site.
Yeah.
And I posted my resume on there, and he noticed that I had some of the skills that were required. Mm-hmm. And he was like, oh, if you want to take one, just contact me, and we'll get you in touch with an interviewer. And so I didn't even need to apply online for that one. I just needed to post my resume online, and I could get an interview from that. Mm-hmm. The catch to that is it's only offered in it's not even in Baltimore. That's the thing. It's an hour away from Baltimore. So and they offered it during spring and summer.
Yeah.
So if I stayed during summer, like I said, I have that problem. But if I did it during spring, I would. That's really tough. I think it's really, really tough, even to work 20 hours a week, I'd say, to be in school full time and still go to an internship where you have to commute for an hour to get to work. So
yeah.
I just kind of disregarded that, and I was like, yeah, thank you for the offer, but I'm not looking for anything like that right now.
Yeah.
Also, this is interesting. So I joined a club that at my school. It's a space club, space club. So they do a lot of aerospace, satellite stuff. Mm-hmm. And I like to call it more of a networking club than an actual design club, because they don't really do any intense design stuff. We just have a lot of meetings and we talk about space, and we bring in employers who talk to us about what they do and how you can get a job in the future and stuff like that. It's really useful for that kind of stuff. And every week they post PowerPoints of just like, oh, here's a few like not very known companies that are doing really cool work in the aerospace industry. And so I went back through those PowerPoints. I looked at all these companies' websites, and I actually found, I think, 2 companies that I was actually decently qualified for. And so I just applied to those companies. They're very, very small, really obscure. I don't think anyone would have found internships from them just looking on job boards or online. You have to really go, like, know the company and go to their website and actually click on careers and apply for internship in order to actually find it. So that was really interesting. I think it's really beneficial if you join some sort of program or some sort of club that allows you to network like that, because you'll find a lot of obscure kind of like small companies that you can apply for that you have a much higher chance of getting into, because it's not a huge applicant pool, and you might be the only intern working at that company just because they're so small.
Yeah,
that's something neat that I think everybody should do. At least like try to find something that can offer you that opportunity.
Yeah, and I think another thing that you should look out for is especially when you get an interview, like, so you haven't quite landed the internship yet, but around the time when you're interviewing and talking with recruiters or talking with your prospective manager, even try to sort of gauge whether or not your manager sees the internship as like, oh, is this a way for me to get cheap labor, or is this a way for me to train the next generation of employees? Like,
right.
if your manager sees it as like, I'm mentoring you, I am training you, I am teaching you important skills because I want you on my team in the future, or using the opportunity to sort of teach back a student and give them some professional experience, then that's a good sign. But if you get the feeling that your employer or the company you're applying for is sort of trying to get at sort of cheap labor, like expecting you to contribute immediately and, paying you a very, very low salary, not a salary, a very low stipend, let's call it.
Yeah.
Then that is something that I would recommend that you stay away from something like that, unless you're like desperate for any sort of experience, then okay. But if you believe that you have a choice, if you believe that you are talented enough to have your own say in things, and you're not worried that you're going to miss out on a bunch of internships, I think you should definitely turn down the ones that are sort of like looking for cheap labor, and focus on the ones that are more tailored towards your learning as opposed to your working. And that's
right.
Definitely something that I saw with NASA, is that they were so focused on learning as opposed to doing. The whole internship program was basically all about learning. And I'm not lying when I say my first 2 or 3 weeks out of like my very short, summer internship. My first 2 or 3 weeks of my spring internship at NASA, literally I just sat at my desk reading and studying and learning, and I was being paid for it. And my mentor had zero expectation for me to code at all. Just as long as I was reading, studying, learning, and I was telling him about the things that I was learning, that was all I needed to do.
Yeah.
Which was awesome. I was literally being paid to learn. And that's the sort of experience that you should be seeking, because at this stage in your life, you're not really doing as much as you're learning. And the skills, I promise you, the skills that you learn in an internship is so valuable. I literally learned all of the things I needed to learn about software engineering to be able to like take software engineering at my university and literally like not care about doing any of the coursework or doing, studying for anything, because I knew everything that needed to be known in software engineering, at least in that course. I mean, I don't claim to know the entire software engineering body of knowledge, but But the course, in terms of the coursework and what the professor expected of me, I knew everything. I knew how to use source control. I knew how to hold discussions with other people to talk about software architecture and such alike and whatever. And so learning stuff on the job is super, super valuable, and you should seek those out and not worry about being able to contribute immediately to the company.
Right. No, I definitely agree with you. I noticed that a lot of the jobs that I've been searching for that are posted will say like, oh, we'll provide like on-site training and like you just have to know some basic things. But like it's really good to look for internships that are really invested in you rather than the other way around, because especially if they say something like, oh, during this internship, students will be expected to learn. I think that's a really good indication. Whereas like, oh, students will be expected to do this. Yeah, cheap labor. That's a lot of the time they're not even paid, right? A lot of internships are not paid.
Yeah, I would definitely shy away from unpaid anything unless you're like absolutely desperate for some sort of portfolio piece or experience. Like if you really have no other choice, then do it, because it's the only thing you can do, and you can't really be picky, right? But if you do have a choice, go for the paid one, because you deserve to be paid for your work. And like especially in the case if you're taking a semester off from school, please definitely go for the paid internship, because you're not making progress towards your degree anymore. And you're not being paid for it. And if you're living off campus, then you need to pay for that housing somehow and your food and such. So go for the paid one. If you have a choice. If you have no choice, like you just need some experience now, then I guess so. But even then, I highly doubt that an unpaid internship is going to be super duper worth it.
Right. I mean, there's this program in high school. Now keep in mind, this is a high school internship that didn't pay students. Most of the companies, I'd say, didn't pay students. And ironically enough, the very few companies that did pay the students, I heard they were the best, just at teaching and like having them actually contribute like meaningful work. Those were the companies that actually paid. So it's really interesting. I think it is important that you do get a paid internship if you're going to like take a leave of absence, or maybe even like relocate. I mean, it's possible.
Yeah, some companies will actually pay for you to like live in in like company sponsored housing for the duration of the internship, which is cool.
Or some companies just have you,
I think
like
Adobe does that.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, really interesting. I found a few companies. I think only one. Yeah, one company that does that. They provide housing assistance, which isn't really the same thing. So you kind of do have to find like your own place, but they will like help you pay during the duration of time. So that's good.
In addition to your stipend, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, if they're going to help pay for that.
I think another thing to look at is actually research internships. Now, these are not like quote unquote real internships, because you're doing research. You're not necessarily like contributing like to a product that's being made. You're just kind of like learning and investigating. But a lot of my friends who have had research internships have said that they're actually like pretty good. Obviously you're not expected to actually like learn a lot of the skills that you would at a company, but I think if you do want to make some money over the summer and do something that's actually like adding to your skill set rather than just sitting around, I think research internships are a good alternative to internships at a company. Don't know if you've ever had any experience of that, but
okay, NASA is like basically all research internships. And I was about to say, like, if you're going to go for grad school, like if you're going to go for master's degree or PhD or any sort of role that involves research internships are just immensely important, because research internships, especially when you are in fact able to contribute to the research, then you have a chance of having your name be published in research papers, right? Which is huge. I mean, if your name is being published in in a paper that basically is creating new knowledge in your field, that's amazing. And that's grad school in the bag, basically. My internship at NASA was a little weird. It's software development inside of a research group. So my group, my department, my team was a research group, and they did research. They conducted research in a particular field, and their research involved producing software. So that was my job, and it wasn't really research more than it was development, like actual development. So, and the reason why I say that nearly all NASA internships are research is because at the end of the internship program, you are expected to present your work at like a poster symposium or in the form of a PowerPoint presentation to the entire internship cohort and a body of mentors and NASA researchers and such who are interested in intern work. So you're expected to sort of present your work back to NASA and to other interns.
Right.
So it was really awkward for me when everybody else was presenting about all this really awesome research about space and, geology and Martian geology and rovers and aerospace. And here I was like, well, what I did during this internship was I wrote a bunch of tests for my software, and I also built this one feature.
Yeah.
And it was like, like to a researcher that isn't super profound, but to a developer that's like, oh, that's really cool. So, my internship was a little weird, but don't think that research internships are any less than like a corporate internship, because when you're going to go for your a graduate school or PhD, those are super duper important, and they can really jumpstart your academic career or I guess your career in academia, I should say.
Right. I actually got an offer because I'm working in a research lab currently, and I'd say that the work isn't actually really research, at least what I'm doing. It's more like the undergrads that they brought in, 2 of them are doing app development, and third one, which is me, I'm doing like hardware development, which is totally not like related to research at all. But since we have a startup company that is working with the research that we're doing, it actually turns out that we are learning like a lot of the skills that we will use at companies. So research internships, I think, are a good way, especially if you can find one that does a lot of design work, to get valuable experience without actually having a quote unquote like corporate internship. I don't really see a huge difference between those two. I guess before we end the podcast, I guess I'd like to ask you a question, Julian.
Sure.
Yeah. So I mean, a lot of students are really focused, at least at my school and a lot of like top schools, they're really focused on filling up their summers with stuff. Have you ever had a summer where you actually haven't had an internship, and what have you done during that summer that you found still really useful to your degree, to your skill set?
Yeah, great question. So I only had an internship for technically 1 summer during my university career. Okay, so that leaves 1 summer where I didn't do anything. Am I getting that count right?
No, you are getting that count right. So
okay,
you had
so
3 years. Yeah, right.
3 years in university, so I only had 2 summers.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So 1 summer was taken up by an internship. The other summer, I was doing an online class.
Oh wow!
Because I needed to. Because my goal was to graduate in 3 years, right? So I needed to take extra classes during the summer. I took extra classes. I took classes at my community college because those are free. Because California is sort of moving towards like free community college, which is great. I love that. So I was able to get free community college, and that gave me college credit that was immediately transferable to my university for elective credits, which is awesome. So I did that, and I took C++ programming as my summer course. In addition to that, I spent the summers doing personal projects. So, I definitely fill your time up with something productive. Of course, you have fun because it's the summer and you're not going to have summer breaks forever. I know I definitely miss summer breaks as an employee. Everybody, especially now, all the students have like month-long breaks. I literally had like a week, and as an employee, and like a week is like a lot for an employee actually. So, I envy students these days with their breaks that happen at such an alarming frequency, and I don't get that anymore as an employee. So enjoy those, but do something productive. Don't just vegetate during the summer, because that's never good for anybody, right?
Right. Yeah. I think that's really good advice. I think I think that internships are important. Don't get me wrong. I think you would agree with that, but they're not like the be all end all, right?
No.
I think if you don't get an internship, there's so many things you could do.
Not the end of the world.
Yeah, you can take, like Julian said, you can take classes, you can do research, you can
projects,
you can learn skills. Yeah, I mean, if you're like learning a programming language, you could go ahead and brush up on that during summer, and then go into the school year strong.
Yep.
It's definitely always an option. You can do personal projects, you can do all sorts of things. One of my friends she's actually planning to run like a kind of like small little tutoring academy for like students who are taking AP classes or the SAT.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's something you can spend your time on, because then you're brushing up on like fundamental knowledge, and at the same time you can make a little bit of income and still not vegetate, like you said.
I mean, you can volunteer, you can do something that contributes to the community even.
Right.
Like, it doesn't have to be your career, it can be something that you're passionate about,
Right. Yeah, I mean, you're still a college student, you have all the time in the world, so just go ahead and do that before you have to go to work.
Yeah, before you become a corporate slave like I am, right?
If you like your job, you're not a corporate slave, but it's all about your mindset. So before we end the podcast, I do have to remind you guys that we work completely for free. We release this information because we want to help students like you, because we've gone through a lot of the same stuff that you guys have, and we know how difficult it is to get skills, to get jobs, to get internships. And so that's why we're making this free content. But we can't really keep this going if we don't get your guys' support. So our podcast is available on Apple, it's available in the Google Play Store, it's available on Spotify, Stitcher, and also on YouTube. So if you guys want to help us and support us, please leave a review on the Apple Podcast Store. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, Apple Podcasts. So because they're the I guess the only platform that has reviews, which is weird. Right. I feel like everybody should be able to like give us feedback, and so on every single platform, I mean, it sucks that reviews are only offered for the Apple platform.
Yeah.
But if you do have any Apple device, whether it's a MacBook, iPad, iPhone, whatever it is, and you have access to our podcasts, please leave a review, because that's huge for our being able to continue giving you this content.
Right, a good review. Good reviews will catapult us and get us more attention, and it'll help people find out more about us. And also, our podcasts and our informational content, our blogs, are all completely funded by the UniPlan app, and the beta for that is releasing quite soon. And so we're going to start asking for beta testers. But for now, the important thing to do is to go onto our website, uniplan.dev, and sign up for our mailing list so you can get more information about any updates on the app and updates on any informational content we have.
Yep.
As well as our social media platforms. So we are on Facebook at Uniplan Team. We're also on Twitter at Uniplan Team. And we are also on YouTube under the name Uniplan.
Yep. And that's where our podcasts go in the form of a video. So if you prefer to watch a video, which, I mean, our faces aren't on the podcast episodes on YouTube, but you get that on YouTube. So if you just happen to be browsing YouTube and that's where you get your content, our podcasts are there as well.
And that's it for the 8th episode of the Study Space podcast. We hope we were able to give you really insightful information on how to get into an internship-seeking mindset. And if you'd like more content from us, please follow us and help support us. Thank you.